Captain Jake Harrison stared at the massive object floating in space ahead of his ship. The exploration vessel New Horizons had been looking for new planets when they found this strange metal structure. It looked old and broken, like someone had left it here a long time ago. "What do you think it is, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. She was the ship's communication officer and always curious about new things they found. Jake rubbed his chin and looked at the readings on his screen. "I don't know, Amy. It's big, though. Maybe twice the size of our ship. Pete, what are your sensors telling you?" Engineer Pete Kowalski looked up from his control panel with excitement in his eyes. "It's incredible, Captain. The metal is like nothing we've seen before. There are energy readings coming from the center. I think there might be some kind of computer or beacon inside. The structure looked like a giant crystal made of dark metal. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing softly with blue light. It spun slowly in the darkness of space, looking both beautiful and mysterious." "Should we get closer?" asked Amy. "Maybe we can learn something about who built it." Jake nodded. "Take us in slowly, Amy. Pete, keep watching those energy readings. If anything changes, tell me right away." As the New Horizons moved closer to the strange object, Pete's instrument started beeping faster. "Captain, the energy levels are going up. It's like the thing knows we're here." Suddenly, the symbols on the structure began flashing brighter. A beam of light shot out from the center and touched their ship. The whole bridge lit up with blue light for a few seconds, then everything went quiet. "What just happened?" Jake asked. Pete looked worried as he checked his readings. "I think we just turned something on, Captain. The beacon is sending out some kind of signal now. A really strong one." "Signal to who?" Amy asked. Before anyone could answer, space around them began to change. The stars seemed to bend and twist, and then ships appeared. Not one or two ships, but hundreds of them. They were huge, dark vessels that made the New Horizons look like a toy boat next to real warships. Jake's mouth fell open. "Where did they come from?" "They just appeared, Captain," Amy said, her voice shaking. "The signal must have called them here." The alien ships formed a circle around the human vessel. Each one was at least 10 times bigger than the New Horizons. Their hulls were covered in weapons that glowed with threatening red light. The largest ship moved forward, and a deep voice filled the bridge. "Primitive vessel, you have activated an Imperial beacon. I am Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Empire. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Jake looked at his crew. Amy was scared but trying to stay calm. Pete was staring at the alien ships with wonder instead of fear. The other crew members waited for their captain's orders. "Well," Jake said with a small smile, "this is interesting. Amy, open a channel to their ship." "Captain, are you sure?" Amy asked. "Yes. Let's talk to them." Amy pressed some buttons and nodded to Jake. He stood up and spoke clearly. "Admiral Zethkar, this is Captain Jake Harrison of the human ship New Horizons. We didn't mean to activate your beacon. We're explorers from Earth, and we've never met anyone from a galactic empire before. This is actually pretty exciting." There was silence for a moment. Then the alien voice came back, sounding confused. "Exciting? You dare to call this exciting? We are the Galactic Empire. We control thousands of worlds. You should be afraid," Jake laughed. "Afraid? Why would we be afraid? You're the first aliens we've ever met. This is the best day of my life." "Would you like to come aboard our ship? We have coffee," Pete whispered to Amy. "Did the captain just invite the scary alien admiral for coffee?" Amy whispered back, "I think he did." The alien voice sounded even more confused. "Coffee? What is coffee? Why are you not begging for mercy?" "Because you haven't done anything to hurt us yet," Jake said. "You seem like reasonable beings. Pete here would love to see your ships. He's our engineer, and he's fascinated by your technology. How do you make ships that big move so fast?" Admiral Zethkar had never encountered anything like this before. Every species the Empire met either ran away in terror or attacked them desperately. None had ever invited him for coffee or asked technical questions about his fleet. "This is not how first contact is supposed to work," the Admiral said, mostly to himself. "How is it supposed to work?" Jake asked with genuine curiosity. "You are supposed to surrender and join the Empire as a subject species. You will provide tribute and follow our laws." Jake thought about this. That sounds boring. What if we just became friends instead? We could teach you about human culture, and you could tell us about the galaxy. We have so many questions. The bridge of Admiral Zethkar's flagship was completely silent. His officers stared at their commander, waiting for orders. None of them had ever heard of humans before, and they certainly had never met any species that responded to Imperial demands with offers of friendship and coffee. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, feeling more confused than he had ever been in his military career. The small human vessel still floated peacefully in the center of his fleet, and its captain was still talking about coffee and friendship. "Admiral," said his second-in-command, "Commander Erix, the humans refuse to surrender. What are your orders?" Zethkar looked at the communication screen where Captain Harrison's friendly face was still visible. The human was actually smiling. No species had ever smiled at the Imperial fleet before. These humans must be taught their place in the galaxy, Zethkar decided. "Commander Erix, set course for their home world. We will show them what happens when a species refuses to bow to the Empire." Jake Harrison watched as the alien ships began to move. "Amy? Are they leaving?" "Yes, Captain, but they're heading toward Earth. I think they want to go to our planet." Pete looked excited. "Maybe they want to see where we come from. That's actually kind of nice of them." Jake nodded. "Well, we better get home first and let everyone know we're having visitors. Amy, send a message to Earth. Tell them we've made first contact with an alien empire and they're coming for a visit." The journey back to Earth took 3 days. The human news networks went crazy with excitement when they heard about the aliens. People gathered in the streets to watch the skies. Scientists prepared their best questions. World leaders argued about how to welcome their visitors properly. When Admiral Zethkar's fleet arrived at Earth, they found a planet that was completely unprepared for war. Instead of military ships, they saw civilian vessels flying out to meet them. Humans in small spacecraft were taking pictures of the Imperial fleet and broadcasting them live to their planet. "Admiral," Commander Erix reported, "the humans have no orbital defenses. Their military ships are small and weak. This will be easy." Zethkar watched as more human ships approached his fleet. These weren't warships trying to attack. They were news crews and scientists who wanted to meet aliens. Some humans were actually waving at his ships. "This is Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Empire," he announced to the planet below. "You have refused our demand for surrender. We will now demonstrate the price of defying Imperial authority. Prepare your defenses." President Danny Coleman sat in his office drinking tea while he listened to the alien message. His advisors were running around in panic, but Danny stayed calm. He had been a soldier once, and he knew fear never helped anyone think clearly. "Mr. President," said his chief of staff, "what should we tell the people?" Danny sipped his tea. "Tell them to stay calm and watch the show. History is being made today." Above Earth, Admiral Zethkar gave the order to attack. His massive ships opened fire on the small human defense fleet that had gathered to meet them. The battle was exactly what everyone expected. The human ships, led by Captain Lisa Martinez on the Defiant Spirit, fought bravely but stood no chance against Imperial technology. Lisa Martinez watched her instruments as enemy fire destroyed her. Ship around her. "This is Captain Martinez to all ships. It's been an honor serving with you. For humanity." The Defiant Spirit exploded in a bright flash, taking one of the smaller Imperial vessels with it. Within 2 hours, every human military ship was destroyed. The Imperial fleet hung in space above Earth, victorious and unopposed. Zethkar felt satisfied as he opened communications with the planet below. Now the humans would understand the power of the Empire. Now they would beg for mercy like every other species. "People of Earth," he announced, "your fleet is destroyed. Your planet is defenseless. Surrender now, and we will be merciful. Resist, and your world will burn." President Coleman appeared on the communication screen, still holding his cup of tea. He looked completely calm, as if alien fleets destroyed human ships every day. "Admiral Zethkar," Coleman said politely. "That was quite impressive. Your ships are remarkably advanced. Would you like to come down to Earth and discuss terms? We have some excellent tea, and I think you might find our planet interesting." Zethkar stared at the screen. "You just watched your entire fleet die. And you want to serve me tea? Well, our pilots died fighting bravely, and we honor their sacrifice," Coleman replied. "But that doesn't mean we can't be civilized about what comes next. Dr. Sophie Walker has prepared a detailed analysis of the battle for you. I think you'll find her observations quite fascinating." Dr. Walker appeared on screen next to the president, holding a thick folder. "Admiral, your tactical coordination was excellent, but I noticed several ways you could improve your formation. Efficiency. Would you like me to send you my notes?" Commander Erix leaned over to his admiral. "Sir, are the humans trying to surrender by giving us military advice?" Zethkar had no idea what was happening. Every other species he had conquered spent this moment crying, begging, or making desperate threats. None had ever offered to help him fight better wars. "Dr. Walker," Zethkar said slowly, "you want to help us improve our military tactics after we just destroyed your fleet?" Sophie smiled brightly. "Of course. Knowledge should be shared. Besides, if we're going to be part of your empire now, we want to make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. I also have some suggestions for your engine designs, if you're interested." On the Imperial flagship, the alien officers looked at each other in complete confusion. They had just won a total victory, but somehow it felt like they were losing something important. The humans were treating their conquest like the beginning of a science project. "Admiral," President Coleman said, "should we prepare quarters for your delegation? I assume you'll want to inspect your new territory personally. We have a lovely guest house in Washington, and our cooks are eager to try making food that aliens might enjoy." Zethkar realized that either humans were the strangest species in the galaxy, or he had no idea how to properly conquer a planet. Either way, he was going to need that tea. 3 weeks after the Imperial fleet conquered Earth, Admiral Zethkar found himself sitting in a small coffee shop in downtown Washington, trying to understand how his perfectly executed military victory had turned into the strangest occupation. In galactic history, the humans had not behaved like a conquered people. Instead of hiding in their homes or organizing resistance movements, they had treated the arrival of Imperial forces like the beginning of a cultural exchange program. Mayor Rick Thompson of New York had been the first to confuse the occupying forces. When Imperial troops landed in Central Park, they expected to take control of the city by force. Instead, Rick met them with a clipboard and a bright smile. "Welcome to New York," Rick had said to Commander Erix. "I've organized tours of the city for your soldiers. We have tickets to Broadway shows, reservations at our best restaurants, and guided visits to the Statue of Liberty. Do your people like baseball? The Yankees are playing tonight." Commander Erix had stared at the mayor for a full minute before, asking, "Don't you understand that we have conquered your city?" "Sure," Rick replied, "but you're still visitors, right? We want you to enjoy your stay. Here's a map of the subway system and a list of the best pizza places. Try Joe's on 42nd Street. Now, 3 weeks later, half of Erix's soldiers were arguing about which pizza restaurant was better, and several of them had learned to play poker from local humans. 2 of his officers had asked for extended shore leave so they could see more Broadway shows. Maria Gonzalez had made the situation even stranger by opening a food truck outside the Imperial Command Center. She served what she called alien fusion cuisine to curious Imperial soldiers who had never tasted anything like human food. "Try the taco with extra hot sauce," Maria told a nervous Vorthak soldier. "It's like your home cooking, but with more flavor." The soldier carefully tasted the food, and his eyes widened with surprise. "This is remarkable. How do you make it so spicy without making it painful?" "Secret ingredient," Maria winked. "Love and good peppers." Admiral Zethkar watched from his command ship as his soldiers became more interested in human culture than in maintaining military discipline. His daily reports to Imperial Command were becoming increasingly difficult to write. What? Was he supposed to tell them? That his troops were attending cooking classes and asking humans to teach them card games? That the conquered population was offering suggestions for improving Imperial technology? Dr. Sophie Walker had been particularly troublesome in this regard. She visited the Imperial ships every day with new ideas for engineering improvements. "Admiral," Sophie said during one of her visits, "I've been looking at your hyperdrive systems, and I think I see why you're having efficiency problems. You're using a linear field matrix when a spiral configuration would give you 30% better fuel economy." Zethkar looked at her drawings and realized she was absolutely right. "How do you understand our technology so quickly?" "It's not that complicated once you see the basic principles," Sophie replied. "Physics is physics, whether you're human or alien." "Would you like me to show your engineers how to recalibrate the field generators?" The Admiral found himself saying yes, even though he knew he shouldn't let a conquered primitive teach his engineers anything. But Sophie's improvements actually worked, and his ships were running better than they had in years. Captain Holly Stevens had created another problem by introducing Imperial soldiers to human sports. She had been a pilot before the conquest, and now she spent her days teaching aliens about basketball, football, and something called good sportsmanship. "The point isn't just to win," Holly explained to a group of confused Vorthak officers. "The point is to play well and respect your opponents. When you lose, you congratulate the other team and learn from your mistakes. But losing is shameful," one officer protested. "Only if you don't learn anything from it," Holly replied. "Every loss teaches you something that can help you win next time. Besides, games are supposed to be fun." The concept of losing gracefully was completely alien to Imperial thinking. Vorthak culture was built on the idea that strength was everything and weakness was unforgivable. The idea that someone could lose a competition and still feel good about themselves was revolutionary. Engineer Nick Carter had made the biggest impact on Imperial forces by treating their advanced technology like an interesting puzzle to solve. When Imperial engineers brought him broken equipment to fix, Nick didn't just repair it, he improved it. "Your plasma conduits are good," Nick told Chief Engineer Grextall, "but if you reroute the power flow through these secondary channels, you'll get better stability and less heat buildup. Want to see?" Grextall watched in amazement as Nick modified Imperial equipment with simple tools and basic materials. The improvements were so obvious once Nick explained them that Grextall felt embarrassed for not thinking of them himself. "Why are you helping us?" Grextall asked. "We conquered your people." Nick shrugged. "Because it's interesting, and because fixing things is what I do. Besides, if we're all going to be using this equipment now, shouldn't it work as well as possible?" The most disturbing development for Admiral Zethkar was that his own officers were starting to question Imperial methods. Commander Irex had begun asking why the Empire conquered planets instead of making allies. Chief Engineer Grextall wanted to know why Imperial technology hadn't improved in centuries when humans could suggest improvements after looking at it for a few days. "Admiral," Commander Irex said during their daily briefing, "the humans have a point about efficiency. Their cities run on renewable energy, they have almost no poverty, and their crime rates are incredibly low. Maybe we could learn something from them." Zethkar felt a headache coming on. "Irex, we are the conquerors. They are the conquered. We don't learn from primitives. But, sir, are they really primitive if they can improve our technology and solve problems we've been struggling with for decades?" The Admiral had no good answer for that question. According to Imperial doctrine, any species they could defeat in battle was by definition primitive and inferior, but the humans were making the Empire's best engineers look incompetent and turning his disciplined soldiers into tourists who wanted to see more of Earth's museums. The worst part was that Zethkar was starting to like his daily conversations with President Coleman. The human leader was intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in learning about galactic politics. He asked good questions and offered reasonable suggestions for improving Imperial administration. It was becoming very difficult to think of humans as conquered primitives when they kept acting like helpful consultants who wanted to make everything work better. News of humanity's strange conquest spread through the galaxy faster than Admiral Zethkar had expected. What should have been a routine report of another successful Imperial victory became the most talked-about event in recent galactic history. Sahid. Problem started when Dr. Alex Bennett published his research paper. Alex was a human engineer who had spent months studying Imperial technology with the enthusiastic cooperation of confused alien technicians. His paper, titled Galactic Engineering Room for Improvement, was supposed to be a simple academic study. Instead, it became a galactic sensation. The paper was translated into hundreds of languages and distributed throughout the Empire. Alien students on 17 different worlds read Alex's analysis of Imperial technology and began asking uncomfortable questions. On the planet Korath, a young engineering student named Vexhai raised her hand during a lecture about hyperdrive mechanics. "Professor," Vexhai asked, "why are we learning the old field matrix design when this human paper shows that spiral configurations are 30% more efficient?" Professor Krelvas looked uncomfortable. "Those are primitive human ideas. Imperial technology is superior." "But, Professor, the math clearly shows that the human design is better. Why don't we use it?" Professor Krelvas had no good answer. Neither did professors on 16 other worlds where students were asking similar questions. The situation became worse when Imperial Technical Academy decided to use Alex's paper as an example of primitive thinking. They wanted their advanced students to analyze it and explain why Imperial technology was superior. The plan backfired spectacularly. Not only did the Academy's best students agree with Alex's improvements, they found additional problems with Imperial designs that even Alex hadn't noticed. Within a month, student protests broke out across the galaxy demanding to know why they were learning outdated engineering when better methods existed. Commander Tony Garcia made the crisis much worse when he accidentally solved the Empire's biggest technical problem during a lunch conversation. Tony had been eating sandwiches with a group of Imperial engineers when Chief Engineer Grextal mentioned the chronic hyperdrive instability that plagued Imperial ships. "Oh, that's easy," Tony said, looking at Grextal's technical drawings. "You've got a resonance feedback loop in your quantum field generators. See this coupling here? If you add a simple phase inverter right there, it'll eliminate the instability completely." Tony sketched the solution on his napkin and handed it to Grextal. The Imperial engineer stared at the napkin for a long moment. The solution was so simple and obvious that he couldn't understand why no one had thought of it before. He ran computer simulations that afternoon and confirmed that Tony's casual suggestion would indeed solve a problem that had bothered Imperial engineers for centuries. When Grextal reported the discovery to Imperial Naval Command, they faced an impossible choice. They could either admit that a human had solved their most serious technical problem during lunch, or they could continue using unstable hyperdrives while their entire fleet gradually fell apart. Naval Command chose to quietly implement Tony's improvement without mentioning where the idea came from. But word leaked out anyway. And soon every engineer in the galaxy knew that humans were not only equal to Imperial technology, but actually superior to it. Ambassador Kate Murphy made everything much worse by starting the Galactic Friendship Initiative. Kate had been Earth's ambassador to the United Nations before the conquest. Now she spent her time inviting representatives from Imperial member species to visit Earth and learn about human culture. The first group of alien visitors expected to see a broken, defeated world. Instead, they found a thriving planet where former enemies were working together to solve problems and improve life for everyone. Ambassador Thexol from the planet Zerion was particularly shocked by what he saw. "This is impossible," Thexol told Kate as they walked through a human city. "You were conquered 3 months ago. Where are the military checkpoints? Where are the forced labor camps?" "We don't have those things," Kate replied. "Admiral Zethkar's people are our guests, not our oppressors. They're here to learn about our planet, and we're learning about the galaxy from them." Thexol watched human children playing with young Vorthak soldiers in a public park. He saw Imperial engineers working side by side with human scientists on collaborative projects. He observed his own species' representatives attending human universities to study primitive technologies that somehow worked better than anything the Empire had developed. "This is not how conquests work," Thexol said. "Maybe that's the problem." Kate suggested gently. "Maybe conquests don't have to work the way they always have." The visiting alien delegates returned to their home worlds with disturbing questions. If humans could maintain peaceful, prosperous societies even after being conquered, why couldn't other Imperial worlds achieve the same thing? If human technology was superior to Imperial designs, why were humans considered primitive? If human methods of governance created better results than Imperial rule, why didn't the Empire adopt those methods? The questions spread from world to world like a virus. Alien species that had been part of the Empire for centuries began looking at their own societies and wondering why they couldn't solve problems the way humans did. Professor Joe Adams made the crisis infinitely worse when he published his doctoral thesis on galactic political science. Joe had spent his career studying government systems and political theory. After first contact with the Empire, he became fascinated by galactic civilization and wrote a comprehensive analysis of imperial governance. His thesis, Applied Galactic Political Science, a comparative study of governmental systems, systematically examined every major decision the Empire had made over the past 1,000 years and compared the results to similar decisions made by human governments. The conclusions were devastating for imperial credibility. Joe proved, using simple logic and historical examples, that every foundational principle of imperial governance was inefficient, counterproductive, and ultimately self-defeating. He showed that conquest-based expansion was economically wasteful, that fear-based rule created instability and rebellion, and that suppressing technological development led to stagnation and decline. Most damaging of all, Joe demonstrated that human-style democratic cooperation produced better results than imperial autocracy in every measurable category, including economic growth, technological advancement, social stability, and military effectiveness. The thesis was published simultaneously on every imperial world. Within days, political movements began forming across the galaxy, demanding democratic reforms and an end to conquest-based expansion. Admiral Zethkar received an urgent communication from Imperial Command. "Admiral," said Supreme Commander Veltar, "what exactly is happening on that primitive world?" "Our intelligence reports suggest that human ideas are spreading rebellion throughout the Empire." Zethkar looked out at Earth, where his soldiers were attending human schools and his engineers were collaborating on projects that made Imperial technology look obsolete. "Sir," Zethkar replied carefully, "I'm beginning to think we may have misunderstood who conquered whom. The rebellion began quietly on the planet Zerion when Ambassador Thexol returned from his visit to Earth. Instead of filing a standard diplomatic report, he called a public meeting and shared everything he had learned about human society. "Fellow citizens of Zerion," Thexol announced to the gathered crowd, "I have seen a better way to live. The humans have shown us that cooperation works better than domination, that innovation thrives under freedom, and that prosperity comes from lifting everyone up instead of keeping others down. The crowd listened in amazement as Thexol described human cities where different species worked together as equals, where problems were solved through discussion instead of force, and where leaders were chosen by the people they served instead of imposed by distant emperors. "What are you suggesting?" asked City Administrator Velnox. "I'm suggesting we try governing ourselves the way humans do," Thexol replied. "I'm suggesting we form a planetary improvement committee and invite our imperial administrators to join us as equals instead of rulers." Within a week, similar meetings were happening on dozens of imperial worlds. The rebellion was unlike anything the Empire had ever faced, because it wasn't really a rebellion at all. No one was declaring independence or attacking imperial forces. Instead, they were simply implementing human-style democratic reforms and inviting imperial officials to participate. On the industrial world of Mechanus, factory workers formed cooperatives and improved production efficiency by 40%. On the agricultural planet Verdania, farmers organized sustainable development councils that increased crop yields while restoring damaged ecosystems. On the mining world Extractus, workers established safety committees that reduced accidents while increasing mineral output. Every reform was based on human examples that visiting delegates had observed on Earth. Every improvement was offered to imperial administrators as a collaborative opportunity rather than a challenge to their authority. The imperial military found itself facing an impossible situation. They were trained to crush armed rebellion, not to respond to polite invitations to join improvement committees. When entire populations began governing themselves more effectively than imperial rule had ever achieved, there was no enemy to fight. Admiral Zethkar watched the situation spiral beyond all control from his flagship above Earth. His own officers were asking daily questions about why they couldn't implement human management techniques in the Imperial fleet. Commander Yerix had been particularly persistent about this. "Admiral," Yerix said during their morning briefing, "Chief Petty Officer Martinez taught me about something called constructive feedback. Instead of punishing mistakes, you help people learn from them. Her method reduced errors in the engineering department by 60%. Zethkar rubbed his temples. "Yerix, we are Imperial officers. We maintain discipline through strength and fear. But, sir, the human method works better. Our engineers are more motivated, more creative, and more efficient when they're not afraid of being punished for honest mistakes." The Admiral had no answer for that. Chief Petty Officer Martinez was a human who had volunteered to help train Imperial crew members in technical procedures. Her teaching methods were so effective that Zethkar's engineers had requested permanent assignment to her training programs. The breaking point came when Supreme Commander Veltar arrived at Earth with a massive fleet to restore Imperial authority. Veltar was the Empire's most respected military leader, known for crushing rebellions with overwhelming force and brutal efficiency. He expected to find Admiral Zethkar's forces corrupted by human influence and the planet Earth preparing for siege. Instead, he found something that challenged every assumption he had ever made about warfare and governance. Zethkar met his superior's flagship in a shuttle accompanied by President Coleman, Dr. Sophie Walker, and engineer Nick Carter. The humans had insisted on coming along to meet the Supreme Commander personally. "Admiral Zethkar," Veltar said grimly, "you have allowed this situation to become a galactic crisis. These primitive humans have somehow infected the entire Empire with dangerous ideas about democracy and cooperation." President Coleman stepped forward with a friendly smile. "Supreme Commander Veltar, welcome to the Sol system. We're honored to meet such a distinguished leader. I understand you're here to address concerns about Imperial stability?" Veltar stared at the human leader, who showed no fear of Imperial power. "You are the source of the rebellion that threatens our civilization." "Actually," Coleman replied thoughtfully, "I think we might be the solution to problems your civilization has been struggling with for centuries. Dr. Walker has prepared some analysis that might interest you." Sophie opened her folder of research. Commander Veltar, we've studied Imperial expansion patterns over the past 1,000 years. Your conquest-based growth model has reached its natural limits. You're spending more resources maintaining control than you're gaining from new territories. The rebellions aren't really rebellions at all. They're symptoms of systemic inefficiency. Veltar was speechless. No conquered species had ever analyzed Imperial strategy and offered to help improve it. Nick Carter joined the conversation. Sir, if you're interested, we've also identified several ways to upgrade your fleet's operational efficiency. Your logistical systems could be streamlined, your communication networks could be enhanced, and your maintenance procedures could be optimized. Would you like to see our recommendations? For the first time in his military career, Supreme Commander Veltar found himself listening to strategic advice from people his empire had supposedly conquered. You want to help us run the empire better? Veltar asked in disbelief. Well, Coleman said, if we're all going to be part of the same galactic community, shouldn't we work together to make it the best community possible? Competition is fine, but cooperation usually produces better results for everyone involved. Veltar spent 3 days on Earth observing human society. He saw former Imperial soldiers working alongside human engineers to solve technical problems. He watched alien diplomats learning human negotiation techniques that resolved conflicts without violence. He observed children from dozens of species playing together in Earth schools. Most importantly, he saw that everything worked better when people cooperated instead of competing. On his final day, Veltar requested a private meeting with Admiral Zethkar. Admiral, Veltar said slowly, I need to ask you something and I want an honest answer. Do you believe the Empire conquered Earth or did Earth conquer the Empire? Zethkar thought carefully before answering. Sir, I think Earth showed us that conquest was never necessary in the first place. They've proven that cooperation achieves everything we thought we needed force to accomplish. Veltar nodded slowly. Then perhaps it's time for the Empire to learn a better way to expand across the galaxy. Supreme Commander Veltar returned to the Imperial capital with the most unusual military report in galactic history. Instead of describing a successful campaign to crush rebellion, he recommended that the Empire adopt human governmental methods across all member worlds. Emperor Drexvan the Terrible received this recommendation in his throne room on the capital world of Dominion Prime. The Emperor had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries through fear, intimidation, and overwhelming military force. The idea of learning from conquered primitives was so absurd that he almost executed Veltar on the spot. You suggest that I, Emperor of 1,000 worlds, should learn governance from creatures who couldn't even defend their own planet? Drexvan asked in a dangerous voice. Your Majesty, Veltar replied carefully, the humans have achieved in a few months what we have failed to accomplish in centuries. Their methods produce better results than ours. The Emperor's advisors shifted nervously. No one had ever told Drexvan that Imperial methods were inadequate. Explain, Drexvan commanded. Veltar activated a holographic display showing comparative data from across the galaxy. Since implementing human-inspired reforms, rebellious worlds have increased their productivity by an average of 40%. Crime rates have dropped by 60%. Technological innovation has increased by 200%. Most importantly, these worlds are no longer rebellious. They're thriving. The data was undeniable. Every world that had adopted human methods was performing better than traditional Imperial territories in every measurable category. Furthermore, Veltar continued, our military forces are operating more efficiently when they use human management techniques. Morale is higher, equipment performance is better, and tactical effectiveness has improved across the board. Emperor. Drexvan studied the reports with growing concern. If human methods were truly superior, what did that say about 3 centuries of Imperial rule? Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Jake Harrison was preparing for the most important diplomatic mission in human history. The former explorer had been chosen to represent humanity at the first Galactic Constitutional Convention, a gathering that would reshape the political structure of the entire galaxy. The convention was Jake's idea, suggested during a casual conversation with Admiral Zethkar about how to address the growing political crisis in the Empire. "Why not just ask everyone what kind of government they want?" Jake had said. "Get representatives from every world together and let them design a system that works for everybody." The concept of asking people what kind of government they preferred was revolutionary in galactic politics. For 1,000 years, the Empire had simply imposed its will on conquered worlds. The idea of consulting with subjects about governance was completely unprecedented. But as human ideas continued to spread throughout the galaxy, more and more worlds were demanding a voice in their own government. The conventional was the Empire's attempt to maintain control by giving people what they apparently wanted while still preserving imperial authority. It didn't work out the way they planned. The convention was held on a neutral space station at the edge of Imperial territory. Representatives from 500 worlds gathered to discuss the future of galactic civilization. Emperor Drexavon attended personally, intending to guide the discussions toward an outcome that preserved his power. Jake Harrison arrived on the space station aboard the newly constructed human diplomatic vessel, Friendship, accompanied by a small delegation of human experts in law, engineering, economics, and social organization. The first shock for the Imperial delegation was that humans had been invited at all. Conquered species didn't usually participate in imperial politics. The second shock was that humans had somehow built an advanced starship in just 6 months, using hybrid human-alien technology that was superior to anything in the Imperial fleet. "How did they construct that vessel so quickly?" asked Imperial Admiral Kethvor. "They asked our engineers for help," Admiral Zethkar replied. "Then they improved on our designs and built something better than what either species could have created alone." The convention began with Emperor Drexavon presenting his vision for reformed imperial governance. His plan would give member worlds limited self-rule while maintaining imperial control over military forces, taxation, and foreign policy. Jake. Harrison listened politely to the Emperor's presentation, then asked for permission to speak. "Your Majesty," Jake said, "your plan has some good ideas, but I think we can do better. What if we designed a system where every world has an equal voice in galactic decisions? What if we shared military responsibilities instead of concentrating them in imperial hands? What if we eliminated taxation altogether and replaced it with voluntary contributions to fund shared projects?" The Emperor stared at Jake in disbelief. "You suggest that primitive worlds should have equal voice with advanced imperial core worlds?" "I suggest that intelligence and wisdom aren't determined by technology levels," Jake replied. "Some of the best ideas at this convention have come from representatives of worlds you consider primitive. Besides, if we're all working together toward common goals, why does it matter who had the idea first?" Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's representative for economic affairs, presented a detailed analysis of galactic resource distribution and trade patterns. Her proposal for a cooperative economic system that eliminated poverty while increasing overall prosperity was so well researched and mathematically sound that even imperial economists couldn't find flaws in it. Engineer Linda Foster demonstrated hybrid technologies that combined the best innovations from dozens of different species. Her presentation showed how collaborative research and development produced better results than the imperial system of keeping technological advances secret from conquered worlds. Legal expert Robert Kim outlined a framework for interstellar law, based on human concepts of individual rights, democratic representation, and peaceful conflict resolution. His system provided better protection for all citizens while being simpler and more efficient than imperial legal codes. As the convention progressed, it became clear that human ideas weren't just popular with rebellious worlds. They were being adopted by imperial core worlds as well. Representatives from the most advanced planets in the galaxy were requesting permission to implement democratic reforms and cooperative economic systems. Emperor Drex Von watched his empire transform itself according to human blueprints. Every vote went against traditional imperial methods. Every proposal that reflected human values passed by overwhelming margins. The final blow came when Admiral Zethkar formally requested to join the human delegation instead of representing imperial military interests. "Your Majesty," Zethkar said, "I have learned more about effective leadership in 6 months with humans than in 50 years of imperial service. I believe the future of galactic civilization lies in cooperation, not conquest." By the end of the Yabi Convention, the galaxy had voted to dissolve the empire and replace it with a democratic federation based on human governmental principles. Emperor Drexvan was offered the position of First Minister in the new government, but only if he agreed to serve at the pleasure of elected representatives from all member worlds. Jake Harrison was elected as the Federation's first president, not because he sought power, but because he had shown that leadership meant serving others rather than ruling them. As the convention ended, Jake stood before the assembled representatives and spoke words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "We came here as conquerors and conquered, as rulers and subjects, as different species from different worlds. We leave here as citizens of the same galaxy, working together to build something better than any of us could create alone." 1 year after the Galactic Constitutional Convention, President Jake Harrison stood on the observation deck of Federation Station, watching construction crews from 17 different species work together to build the galaxy's first collaborative research facility. The transformation of galactic civilization had exceeded everyone's expectations. The Federation of Free Worlds had grown from the original 500 member planets to over 800 worlds in just 12 months. More importantly, every new member had joined voluntarily after seeing the benefits of cooperative governance. Admiral Zethkar, now serving as Federation Security Coordinator, joined Jake at the observation window. "The construction is ahead of schedule," Zethkar reported. "The Vorthak engineering teams are working well with the human architects. They've developed some fascinating hybrid building techniques." Jake smiled as he watched alien and human workers collaborating on the massive space station. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're working toward the same goals instead of against each other. The research station was just one example of how the galaxy had changed. Without the need to maintain massive military forces for conquest and control, the Federation had redirected resources toward scientific advancement, infrastructure development, and quality-of-life improvements. Dr. Sophie Walker had been appointed as the Federation's Chief Science Coordinator, overseeing collaborative research projects that brought together the best minds from hundreds of worlds. Her latest report showed breakthrough discoveries happening at 10 times the rate achieved under Imperial rule. When you combine human creativity with Vorthak precision and Xerion analytical skills, Sophie had explained to the Federation Council, you get solutions that none of our species could have developed alone. The economic transformation had been equally dramatic. Earth's representative, Dr. Sarah Martinez, had worked with economists from across the galaxy to implement the cooperative economic system proposed at the convention. Within 6 months, poverty had been eliminated on 43 worlds, and overall, galactic prosperity had increased by 60%. The secret was simple: cooperation was more efficient than competition when it came to meeting everyone's basic needs. Instead of worlds hoarding resources or competing for trade advantages, the Federation shared technology and resources based on need and capability. Former Emperor Drex Von had surprised everyone by becoming one of the most effective leaders in the new government. Freed from the burden of maintaining control through fear, he had discovered that he actually enjoyed solving problems and helping people improve their lives. "I spent 3 centuries forcing obedience," Drex Von had told Jake during a recent meeting. "I never realized how much more satisfying it is to earn respect through service." Drexvan now served as the Federation's coordinator for planetary development, helping newly independent worlds establish democratic governments and sustainable economies. His centuries of experience with galactic administration, combined with human principles of governance, made him incredibly effective at his new job. The military transformation had been the most remarkable change of all. Instead of conquest-focused imperial fleets, the Federation maintained cooperative defense forces that protected member worlds from external threats while serving as rapid response teams for natural disasters and humanitarian crises. Commander Tony Garcia, the human engineer who had solved the hyperdrive stability problem, now led the Federation's engineering corps. His teams had revolutionized space travel by developing hybrid technologies that made interstellar transportation safer, faster, and more efficient. The old Imperial ships were built for intimidation, Tony explained to visiting dignitaries. Our new vessels are built for exploration, rescue operations, and peaceful cooperation. They're much better at actually helping people. The cultural changes had been just as significant as the political and economic improvements. Ambassador Kate Murphy's Galactic Friendship Initiative had evolved into a galaxy-wide cultural exchange program that promoted understanding and cooperation between different species. Children from dozens of worlds now attended integrated schools where they learned about different cultures, languages, and ways of thinking. The generation growing up in the Federation was developing a truly galactic perspective that transcended species boundaries. Captain Holly Stevens had established the Federation Sports League, which had become wildly popular across the galaxy. The concept of friendly competition where everyone could participate and learn from each other had revolutionized how different species interacted. Sports teach you that losing isn't the end of the world, Holly explained to Federation Council members. Every game teaches you something that makes you better next time. That's a good metaphor for democracy, too. Not every change had been smooth. Some former Imperial worlds had struggled with the transition to self-governance, and a few had initially rejected Federation membership in favor of maintaining traditional authoritarian rule. But even these holdout worlds were gradually changing, as they watched their neighbors prosper under Federation principles. The benefits of cooperation were so obvious that resistance to democratic reform was gradually disappearing. The former imperial capital of Dominion Prime had been the most dramatic transformation. Once a fortress world devoted to military control, it had become the galaxy's center for diplomatic training and conflict resolution. Former imperial officers studied human negotiation techniques and learned to resolve disputes through discussion rather than force. Jake often reflected on how accidental the entire transformation had been. Humans had never intended to revolutionize galactic civilization. They had simply responded to conquest the only way they knew how, by trying to make friends and improve their situation through cooperation and problem-solving. We didn't set out to change the galaxy, Jake had told a gathering of Federation historians. We just tried to be ourselves. It turns out that being friendly, curious, and helpful was exactly what the galaxy needed. The historians were documenting the transformation for future generations, trying to understand how a species that had been defeated in battle had somehow managed to reshape an entire galactic civilization in just 2 years. Professor Joe Adams, whose political science thesis had helped spark the Democratic Revolution, was now writing a comprehensive study of the Federation's development. His preliminary conclusions suggested that cooperation was not just more ethical than conquest, but actually more effective at achieving long-term stability and prosperity. The old empire expanded through force and maintained control through fear, Joe wrote. This created a system that was inherently unstable and increasingly expensive to maintain. The Federation expands through invitation and maintains unity through mutual benefit. This creates a system that grows stronger and more stable over time. As Jake watched the construction crews complete another section of the research station, he thought about how much the galaxy had changed since that day when the New Horizons had accidentally activated an Imperial beacon. Humanity had stumbled. into the Galactic Empire and laughed at their defeat. In doing so, they had discovered that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't superior technology or military might. It was the simple idea that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, and that people could accomplish amazing things when they worked together toward common goals. 5 years after first contact, Jake Harrison sat in a small cafe on New Geneva Station, watching his granddaughter play with children from 12 different species. The sight still amazed him, even though it had become perfectly normal throughout the Federation. "Grandpa Jake," 8-year-old Emma Harrison called out, "Krell Knox says his people used to be scared of humans. Is that true?" Jake looked over at young Krell Knox, a Vorthak child whose family had immigrated to the station when his father joined the Federation Engineering Corps. "Well, Emma, his people thought we might be dangerous because we were different from them. But it turned out we could be friends instead." Emma nodded seriously and went back to playing a game that seemed to involve building something complicated with blocks while speaking in a mixture of human languages and alien dialects. Admiral Zethkar joined Jake at his table, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The former Imperial commander had developed a taste for human beverages during his years working with Federation forces. "The quarterly reports are in," Zethkar said as he sat down. "Galaxy-wide prosperity is up another 12%. Crime rates continue to decline. We've had no military conflicts between member worlds for 18 consecutive months." Jake sipped his coffee and smiled. "Remember when you thought conquering Earth would be routine?" "I remember thinking that humans were primitive because your military technology was inferior to ours," Zethkar replied. "I had no idea that your social technology was centuries ahead of anything in the galaxy." The cafe around them was a perfect example of how the galaxy had changed. Species that had been enemies for generations now worked together, lived together, and raised their children together. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering that combined the best innovations from dozens of different worlds. Dr. Sophie Walker entered the cafe with her usual armload of research tablets and joined them at their table. As the Federation's chief science coordinator, she was always working on multiple projects simultaneously. "Jake, you need to see the latest discoveries from the Andromeda Research Initiative," Sophie said excitedly. "The collaborative teams have made breakthroughs that are going to revolutionize space travel again." She showed them holographic displays of new engine designs that combined human theoretical physics with alien engineering expertise. The new technology would make travel between galaxies possible within a few decades. The Xerion mathematicians solved the field equations that our physicists couldn't figure out, Sophie explained. And the Vorthak engineers found a way to build components that we thought were impossible to manufacture. Together, we've created something that none of our species could have developed alone. Jake studied the technical specifications with amazement. "So we'll be able to visit other galaxies?" "Not just visit them," Sophie grinned. "We'll be able to invite them to join the Federation. Imagine what we could accomplish with the knowledge and creativity of dozens of different galaxies working together." The possibility was exciting, but it also reminded Jake of how much the galaxy had already changed. The Federation now included over 1,500 worlds, and new members were joining every month. Each new world brought unique perspectives, technologies, and cultural innovations that benefited everyone. President Coleman, who had been re-elected twice by overwhelming margins, had established the Open Galaxy policy that welcomed any world, willing to commit to democratic governance and peaceful cooperation. The policy had been so successful that the Federation was running out of space for all the new diplomatic facilities needed to process membership applications. Former Emperor Drexvan approached their table with his own cup of coffee. The former dictator had become one of Jake's closest friends and most trusted advisors. His transformation from galactic tyrant to public servant remained one of the most remarkable personal changes in Federation history. "Jake," Drexvan said, "I've been thinking about something you said 5 years ago. You told me that humanity had stumbled into the Empire and laughed at their defeat. I finally understand what you meant. Oh? Jake asked. You didn't laugh because losing was funny, Drexavan explained. You laughed because you realized that what looked like defeat was actually an opportunity. The Empire gave humanity a chance to show the galaxy a better way to live. Jake nodded thoughtfully. We learned a long time ago that how you respond to problems is more important than the problems themselves. When life gives you challenges, you can either complain about them or figure out how to make things better. That's what makes humans so dangerous, Zethkar added with a smile. You turn every setback into an improvement opportunity. You're the only species I know that gets more optimistic when things go wrong. Emma Harrison ran over to their table, followed by her multi-species group of friends. Grandpa Jake, we're building a new space station with our blocks. Want to see? The children led the adults over to their construction project, which turned out to be an incredibly detailed model of a space station that incorporated architectural elements from dozens of different cultures. The young builders explained their design choices with the casual expertise of people who had grown up in a truly integrated galactic society. This section is for the Zarion Meditation Gardens, explained a young Zarion girl named Veltara, and this part has human-style schools where everyone can learn together. The engineering section uses Vorthak precision manufacturing, added Krell Knox, but with human safety features so no one gets hurt. And this is the cultural center where we can share art and music from all our worlds, finished Emma. Because sharing makes everything better. Jake watched the children explain their creation and realized that they represented the true victory of human values. These young people didn't see species differences as barriers to overcome. They saw them as resources to combine in creating, something better than any single culture could produce alone. As evening approached on the station, Jake walked to the observation deck where he had spent so many hours over the past 5 years watching the galaxy transform. The view now included construction sites for 3 new research facilities, 2 diplomatic academies, and a massive shipyard where Federation vessels were built using collaborative technologies. Captain Holly Stevens joined him at the railing. She had been promoted to Federation Athletic Coordinator and spent her time traveling between worlds to establish sports programs that brought different species together. Remember when you thought teaching aliens about good sportsmanship was just about games? Jake asked. Holly laughed. I had no idea we were actually teaching the entire galaxy how to cooperate. Turns out the principles are the same whether you're playing basketball or running a planetary government. The observation deck began filling with other people as word spread that Jake was there. Over the years, these informal gatherings had become a tradition. Federation citizens would join Jake to share news, discuss problems, and plan new projects. Tonight, the crowd included humans, Vorthaks, Xerions, and representatives from a dozen other species. They talked about their families, their work, and their hopes for the future. Children played while adults collaborated on solutions to challenges facing their communities. Jake looked around at the diverse group of people who had become friends, colleagues, and neighbors. 5 years ago, most of these species had been enemies or strangers. Now they were building a shared future based on mutual respect and cooperation. You know what I think was the real victory? Jake said to the assembled group. It wasn't that we changed the galaxy. It was that the galaxy changed us too. We're all better than we were when we started this journey. A young Vorthak engineer named Grextel raised his hand. Jake, my grandfather fought in the Imperial fleet that conquered Earth. He told me that humans were the strangest enemies he ever encountered because you kept trying to help your conquerors succeed. Why did you do that? Jake thought about the question for a moment. Because we figured out that when your supposed enemies succeed at becoming better people, you don't have enemies anymore. You have friends. As the gathering continued into the night, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. Humanity had indeed stumbled into the Galactic Empire and laughed at their defeat. But the laughter hadn't been mockery or defiance. It had been the laughter of people who understood that the best victories were the ones where everyone won something valuable. The galaxy had gained democracy, prosperity, and peace. Humanity had gained the stars, countless new friends, and the knowledge that their values could make a difference on the largest possible scale. Looking out at the busy space lanes where ships from hundreds of worlds traveled freely between their homes, Jake smiled and whispered the words that had become the Federation's unofficial motto. When life gives you an empire, turn it into a family.